Welcome to the Fruitful Faith Women on Mission podcast. This podcast is created for purpose-driven women just like you who crave more. On the Fruitful Faith podcast, you can expect Christ-centered conversations that will help you to cultivate a life that you and He love. We'll be talking about topics that matter, topics that impact your everyday life. We'll talk about anything from how to transition with grace, to what to do when you're overwhelmed, to how to be content and joyful right where God's got you. It's going to be good. Let's dive on in. Hi, and welcome back to Season 2 of the Fruitful Faith Women on Mission podcast. In Season 2, we are talking about breakthroughs. It's called our Breakthrough series. And today's episode is all about how to break through negative self-talk. So I know this is really real for a lot of us. I don't know if you've heard the concept before, but this really stuck out to me. The idea that we've each got a mean girl living inside of us. And it's really hard sometimes, right? And so as you think about that, as you think about your inner mean girl, if you will, what is that thing that you're constantly telling yourself? We all have a soundtrack really that's less than helpful that we can play in our minds. And maybe that inner mean girl, maybe she's telling you that you're too much, or maybe it's that you're not enough, or maybe you're still beating yourself up over something that happened perhaps over 10 years ago. So take a second to consider, is this reinforcement, is this thing that the mean girl keeps telling you over and over again, is it helpful or is it harmful? So keeping stuck and really playing small, this is not honoring the Lord, and this is not relying on Him in the way that we could or we should. So, friend, this is again essentially the topic where we are going to focus today, and it's all about how to break through negative self-talk, what that looks like, how to do it. Whatever the negative self-talk is that's playing in your mind, sister, let's help you to let it go once and for all. Okay, so how are we going to do this? As per usual, we're going to take you through some different coaching questions to get you thinking about this topic in a different way and hopefully just enact change in a really, really powerful way. So as we think about, like we had said, this mean girl concept, what might be helpful is one, just recognizing that this is happening, being aware of it, calling it out, catching it, if you will. And maybe if you want to go a step further, it's even giving it or her a name. There's such and such again, it's happening again, and that can help you to take some of the power back. Then the next thought that I'll offer is, well, it's important for us to think about, well, what is this lie that you believe? What tends to come up for you again and again? Maybe it's that you're not going to be able to keep it up, whatever that thing is. Maybe it's you're questioning why try to do X, Y, Z because you see someone else who's already doing it and she's already doing it way better than you think you ever could. Or maybe it's you're not whatever enough, intelligent enough, have a certain look enough, whatever it is. It's maybe you're not enough. So what is that lie that you believe? Identifying it is going to be the first step in helping to let it go. And then you want to consider, is this lie something that you've put on yourself? Or is it something that someone else has put on you? And taking a second to think about that, where are the origins of this? And then you want to think about, how long has these negative thoughts been a pattern? Maybe this connects ultimately to something that's happened in your career, and you haven't let it go since then. Or maybe the negative self-talk, maybe it connects back to an incident that had happened in the 6th grade. Whatever it is, just think for a moment, how long has this thing been a pattern? And that might be really helpful to give you perspective. And then you want to think through, well, how is this negative self-talk hijacking your life? What is this fear or these lies stealing from you? Maybe it's keeping you from trying something new. Maybe it's keeping you from stepping out in courage and in faith. So think about that for a moment and get really honest with yourself. What is this negative self-talk stealing from you? And then think about, well, what if it continues on? What if you continue for another 5 years, 10 years, and let this belief play front and center of your mind? What will you be missing out on if you let this continue to take up the brain space that it is now? And then as we kind of move to a different perspective, you might want to think about, if these negative self-beliefs are being articulated and shared aloud, how would a friend respond? What would one of your best girlfriends say to you if you were to share these things? And then you might want to speak those truths that she would share over yourself too. It's important to know and to hear and distinguish truth from lie. But then taking it a step even further, how would God respond to this lie? What would he say when you bring this to him? Maybe it's that you're fearfully and wonderfully made. Maybe he would just share just scripture verses that are true, but hearing it from God's perspective changes everything. So, how would a friend respond to your negative self talk? How would God respond to your negative self talk? And then, if your negative self talk was no longer a challenge, how might your life change? So, think about, what would you do differently? If this thought or emotion was gone and banished, how would your life change? One thing that had really stood out to me, an idea or concept, maybe your negative self-talk is why do XYZ? Someone else is already doing it and she's doing it really well. I want to say this is in Christy Wright's book, Business Boutique, or she had mentioned it in some podcast, but she essentially kind of connected the thought to, like, let's say you want to be a health coach. But health coaches, it seems like they come a dime a dozen. There are a lot of them out there. And so what do you do? And so she kind of connected it to thinking about a bookstore. For instance, if you go into a bookstore, they don't have one book on gardening. They have dozens upon dozens, maybe depending on what you want to garden, what part of the country you are in, depending on the author. The whole point here is that we all have a different voice and perspective, and niche, if you will. And your voice and who you're going to speak to is valuable. So kind of just keep that bookstore description in mind. There's not just one authority on one topic, but many. And there are going to be specific people who God has purposed, that really need to hear your voice and your message. So as we think about, we kind of talked about where you are with negative self-talk, where life could be if you let go of it. And now we're going to kind of move into just planning, and changing things. So the next thought here for you guys is, what will you commit to letting go of? So maybe something with a friend happened way back when, and you've held on to that unhealthy, untrue identity unnecessarily. What do you want to commit to letting go of? Maybe it's just believing that whatever that is not who I am, and I'll no longer let that define me. Think about that thing. And the other thing that I'll add too is, when I was back in the corporate world in human resources, as we would teach certain workshops, it was really important to know the distinction of behaviors versus identity. So, what someone is behaving as, that's not who they are. Behavior is separate. So, just know that behavior can be changed, and there is opportunity for growth there. Another exercise that you might want to consider, is a counseling exercise. And this is from a therapist. And she had recommended this tip. And it is, at the end of every day, to grab a journal and write the phrase, I forgive myself for judging myself as. And sometimes, maybe even, before we get to work and sit down at our desk in the morning, we might have said 6 negative things to ourselves. It's kind of wild once you start to become aware of it. But it's not just writing, I forgive myself for judging myself as, and then writing out the 10 things that you had said negatively that day. It's every time you have a thing, writing, I forgive myself for judging myself as, to let it kind of get into your unconscious and really start to unlock some things. So that's another really good one. And then third is getting clear on, well, what would you like to, or, what do you need to believe instead? And so affirmations are a really powerful tool here because it really gets, when your beliefs change, your outcomes change. So I know I've shared about this on the podcast before, but the results cone is so powerful as we think about why affirmations are important. And the results cone says that everything stems with our beliefs. So from our beliefs come our thoughts and our feelings. And from our thoughts and our feelings, out of those stem our behaviors. And then from our behaviors come our results or our outcomes. So when we think about that funnel, essentially our results all connect to our beliefs. So what I'd really encourage you is to look up some faith-based affirmations. There's so many different great options that you can find online that are connected to scripture. Things like, you're because of God, you're always cared for, you're valued, you're the light of the world. We are overcomers, we are forgiven, we are new creations. You can go again and again and again, finding really good scripture-based affirmations. And then I'd also encourage you to check out Valerie Paper has a blog post all on affirmations from a biblical viewpoint. So affirmations are great, but what's really great is connecting them to our faith. So I encourage you to get clear on what truths that you want to bring into your life, invite into your life instead. And maybe it's saying these affirmations aloud. Speaking them is going to take it to a next level than reading them. Maybe it's writing them aloud, just writing it again and again and again. Maybe it is journaling about them, kind of expanding upon what God is showing you. Or, maybe it's digging into the scripture before and after that's connected to the affirmation. So those are a couple ideas for you right there. Okay, and then as per usual, we want to think about how can we be proactive when we're on a great track, we're doing well, and then we start to worry or get distracted by things. So what's going to help you stay on track? So we're going to talk through some of that right now. So a question to consider is, what are the situations that might trigger you to revert back to your negative self-talk patterns? So maybe it's being with a certain person. Maybe it is doing a certain activity at work. Whatever it is, just be alert that when you're in that spot or you're about to go to that spot, just be aware and then be kind to yourself. Do what you need to do to prepare your heart and mind to be present and to be equipped in those hard spaces. Then you might want to consider, how might you redirect when a negative thought comes in? We are not immune to it. It's not necessarily a thing that we'll ever fix or get rid of completely, but it's something that we can get better at and we can reduce over time. And so maybe it's talking with a friend when this is happening. Maybe it is going back to those affirmations. Maybe it is dismissing that thought and choosing a different narrative instead. And then last but not least, consider who's going to keep you honest. Kind of taking this challenge outside of ourselves can be super powerful. It's vulnerable, but if we really want to change, it might be helpful to let a loved family member into this or a trusted friend and share with them. Share with them kind of where you're at with things and where you want to be. And just ask if you could check in and if they could offer encouragement and follow up with you occasionally. When we share our thoughts or concerns or our fears aloud, it often bringing them into the light, it diminishes the darkness, right? They might sound really scary when they're up in our head, but when we speak them aloud, those fears literally sound different and the darkness becomes to be dispelled when we share them. And in community, we're stronger together. So there you go. That is what we are going to talk through today as you think about how you can overcome negative self-talk. So just go back and consider to yourself, what is the one thing that stuck out to you today in the biggest way? Maybe it is a to-do. Maybe it is just identifying what this negative self-talk is. Maybe it is just thinking, well, how would God respond when I say that thing? Whatever it is, kind of consider that and make a promise to yourself and to the Lord to dig into this together because there's so much fruit and possibility and potential on the other side. And we don't want you to stay stuck. So what I want to share with you as we transition is a amazing review from one of our sweet listeners, and this is from the Mullins family. And she had shared, as she talked about the podcast, she said that it was what I never knew I needed, which I love. Thank you for that. And what she says is that she's been a fan of personal development content for as long as I can remember. I also enjoy listening to Christian podcasts, but never knew there was an option to combine the two. She shares about how I'm a certified professional life coach who offers biblical perspective on a variety of personal development topics. She really enjoys how this podcast focuses on balance while striving to achieve goals, but doing it all for God's glory. She also says that I have a soft spoken and calm demeanor, and she instantly feels at ease while listening to these episodes. And overall, her favorite part of this podcast is that it offers valuable and uplifting content with a focus on following God's will and way above self glorification, which we can all use more of these days. So, thank you so much for writing that review and sharing. It is so helpful when y'all leave reviews. I included instructions and a highlight over on Instagram. So that's at Grace Based Christian Coaching if we're not already friends on Instagram. And would love for you to leave a review if you haven't already. It's only 3 super simple steps. It's super easy to do. And why it's important is that it helps others to find the podcast so that we can continue to grow. It's helpful to know who's listening and that the numbers are increasing because, like everyone, time is limited. So to know that this is something that is valuable and helpful for you is such an encouragement and blessing. And it keeps me going and helps me to know what y'all love about this and what could be helpful to create more content on. So would love for you, if you haven't already, to leave a review. I would love to read your review on an upcoming episode. And just thank you so much for listening in. I just hope that these words and this encouragement is just such a bright spot and blessing in your day, and love doing this together. So till next time. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Fruitful Faith Women on Mission podcast. If you love this episode, I would love for you to subscribe. New episodes will automatically show up on your phone when you subscribe. It's super convenient and you'll make sure you never miss a thing. So excited to share more with you soon.